Billionaire finds a black girl sleeping in trash on Christmas Eve. The truth shocks him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was Christmas Eve. The streets of the city were covered in a soft blanket of snow, the kind that sparkled under the streetlights. The busy city seemed to slow down for just a moment as people hurried to finish their last-minute shopping, while others gathered around Christmas trees, their homes filled with warmth. But not everyone was so lucky. Just a few blocks away, tucked in the shadows of a back alley, a small figure lay motionless in the snow. A young black girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, curled up in a pile of discarded trash bags. Her face was hidden beneath a layer of dirt and grime. But even from a distance, the exhaustion was apparent in the way her tiny body shivered in the cold. She had no blanket, no warmth, only the bitter chill of the winter air. She had fallen asleep in that very spot, alone, forgotten, and abandoned. Meanwhile, a man, tall and dressed in a well-tailored coat, stood outside a luxurious building, a man known for his wealth and influence, a billionaire who had seen it all. His name was Alexander Stone, and tonight, he was lost in thought, trying to put the pieces of his life together. As he walked down the street, heading towards his car, his attention was caught by something unusual. He paused, squinting into the shadows, his sharp eyes catching sight of the girl. His heart skipped a beat. No child should be in such a place, especially not on Christmas Eve. Without thinking, he stepped forward, the sound of his shoes crunching the snow beneath him. He approached the girl cautiously, unsure of what to expect. When he was close enough, he knelt down beside her, gently tapping her on the shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, wide with fear and confusion. For a moment, neither of them moved. She looked up at him with eyes full of desperation, as though she hadn't seen a kind face in years. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, his voice softer than usual. The girl didn't respond immediately. She just stared up at him, too tired to speak. Finally, after a long silence, she whispered, "I'm fine." Alexander's chest tightened as he looked at her, lying in the snow with no one to care for her. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but the only one that mattered was, "Why are you out here?" He extended his hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he reached out to help her. The girl hesitated, then slowly took his hand, as though she wasn't sure whether she should trust him. "Where's your family?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she turned her gaze to the ground, her face softening in sadness. Alexander's heart sank as he realized that she had no family to turn to. He was about to offer her a ride, to get her somewhere warm and safe, but something inside him stopped him. He had never been one to intervene in situations like this, but tonight felt different. The cold, the loneliness in the girl's eyes, it all seemed to hit him in a way he hadn't expected. "Come with me," he said softly. The girl hesitated but nodded slowly. She didn't know where they were going, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they walked down the snowy street, two strangers in a world full of chaos and confusion. Little did they both know, this chance encounter would change both of their lives forever. As Alexander and the little girl walked down the snow-covered street, the weight of the night pressed heavily on him. His mind raced with questions, but no answers seemed to come. The little girl walked beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly. It was as if she had forgotten how to trust anyone, yet something about this man made her feel a flicker of hope. They didn't speak for a while. The silence between them was filled only with the sound of their footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. The city's holiday lights twinkled in the distance, but here, in this moment, it was just the two of them, the cold and the quiet. As they reached Alexander's luxurious car, he paused, opening the door for her. She hesitated for a moment, looking up at him with uncertainty in her eyes. He smiled gently, urging her to get in. "It's all right, you'll be safe," he reassured her, though a part of him wasn't sure if he believed his own words. The girl climbed into the car, curling up in the seat, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. As the engine hummed to life, Alexander glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. She was so small, so fragile, and yet there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself. "What's your name?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide and distant. "Anna," she replied quietly, her voice barely audible. "Anna, that's a beautiful name," Alexander said, his voice warm. He glanced at her once more. "How old are you, Anna?" "I'm 7, she answered. The way she said it, almost as if she were unsure of the answer, made his heart ache. He didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to talking to children, especially not in situations like this. "Where do you live, Anna?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Anna didn't answer right away. She simply stared out the window, her gaze lost in the passing lights of the city. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice small. "I don't have a place to live," she said. Alexander's heart tightened at her words. He didn't know what to say, but he didn't want to press her any further. He focused on the road ahead, trying to shake the feeling of helplessness that was settling deep in his chest. When they arrived at his mansion, the grand gates opened to reveal the impressive estate, surrounded by tall hedges and neatly manicured lawns. It was hard for Alexander to even comprehend that such a place could exist, especially in the same world where children like Anna slept in the streets. He led her inside, showing her to the guest room. Anna looked around, her eyes wide with awe and confusion. It was so different from anything she had ever seen. The soft lighting, the warm colors, the plush furniture, it all felt like a dream to her. She stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do next. "This is your room for tonight," Alexander said gently, trying to reassure her. "You can stay here as long as you need." Anna nodded, but she didn't move. She was too overwhelmed by everything. The contrast between the life she knew and the life she was now surrounded by was too much to take in all at once. Alexander stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of how to comfort her. He wasn't used to dealing with emotions, especially not when it came to someone so young. He wanted to say something, but the words felt too heavy. "I'll leave you alone for now," he said softly, closing the door behind him. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the image of Anna standing in the middle of that room, looking so lost and out of place. He knew he had made the right decision in bringing her here, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear: Anna's life was about to change. For better or for worse, he had made a choice, and he wasn't going to back down. Later that evening, as Anna sat in the guest room, she gazed out the window at the stars. She had never seen anything like this before. The quiet luxury of the mansion, the warm bed, the safety, it all felt like something out of a fairy tale. But she couldn't let herself forget where she had come from. She still remembered the cold alley where she had fallen asleep, the bitter hunger in her stomach, and the hopelessness she had felt when she thought no one would ever care. As much as she wanted to believe that this new life could be real, a part of her refused to let go of the fear. She had been hurt too many times before. The night stretched on, and Anna eventually fell asleep in the unfamiliar room, the weight of the day settling into her small frame. She dreamed of a better life, one where she could feel safe, loved, and at peace. But even in her sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She wasn't sure if she could trust Alexander Stone, the man who had taken her in. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. "I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps outside the door." Anna stirred in the large bed, still wrapped in the warmth of the blankets she had never known before. It was early in the morning, and the soft rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a peaceful glow over the room. But even in this comfort, Anna's thoughts drifted back to the cold alley where she had spent countless nights alone, wondering if anyone would ever care. She couldn't quite let herself believe that this was real. She had been hurt too many times before, and trust was something that didn't come easily to her. Still, she had to admit, last night was different. Last night was a step towards something new, something better. But the fear, the worry, still lingered in her chest, a constant reminder of where she had come from. Alexander had been kind to her, there was no doubt about that. He had given her a place to sleep, something to eat, and a warmth that felt unfamiliar. But Anna didn't know him. He was a stranger, a man with a life so different from hers that it almost felt like they were living in different worlds. She sat up slowly, her feet touching the cool floor as she rubbed her eyes. She had never been in a room this big, or this quiet? It felt like a dream, but part of her was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. As she stood up and stretched, she looked around the room again. It was all so new, and yet so strange. She had never had anything like this, not in her entire life. The bed, the soft carpet beneath her feet, the elegant furniture. It was all a stark contrast to the cold concrete she had grown used to. But as much as she wanted to take it all in, Anna knew that she couldn't get too comfortable. She couldn't let herself forget the reality of her life before this moment. The reality that she didn't belong here, that she was a stranger in this world of luxury. Just as she was about to gather her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. She froze, unsure of what to do. Alexander's voice called softly from the other side. Anna, are you awake? There was something gentle in his tone, but Anna didn't know how to respond. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Yes, she said quietly. The door creaked open, and Alexander stepped inside. He smiled when he saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, looking uncertain. Good morning, he said, his voice calm. How did you sleep? Anna didn't answer immediately. She just nodded, not sure how to explain the mix of emotions she felt. I hope it was comfortable, Alexander continued. I know this must be all so new to you. Anna didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands, still unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to being treated like this, with kindness and care. It made her feel vulnerable, exposed. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, Alexander added, sensing her discomfort. But if you want to talk, I'm here. Anna glanced up at him, his offer hanging in the air. She wasn't sure what to do with his kindness. It felt overwhelming, like a warmth she wasn't sure she deserved. But at the same time, it was exactly what she needed. I'm just not used to all of this, she said finally, her voice soft. It's okay to feel like this, Alexander said, his tone reassuring. But I want you to know that you're safe here. You don't have to go back to the way things were. You don't have to be alone anymore. Anna's heart swelled at his words, but the fear still gnawed at her. What if I don't belong here? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What if I don't fit in? Alexander knelt down in front of her, looking her in the eyes. You belong here because you are you, Anna. And that's enough. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to fit into anyone's idea of who you should be. You just need to be yourself. Anna's chest tightened, but this time it was with something different. It wasn't fear or sadness, but something new, a flicker of hope. She had spent so long fighting to survive, to just get by, that she had never imagined a life where she could simply be herself, where she didn't have to fight for every moment of safety. As the weight of his words settled in, Anna allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that maybe things could be different. Maybe she could have a life where she didn't have to worry about what came next. Alexander smiled, standing up. I'll leave you to get ready for breakfast. When you're ready, come downstairs. I'll be in the dining room. Anna nodded, her heart a little lighter than it had been the night before. As Alexander walked out, closing the door behind him, she sat there for a moment, allowing herself to breathe. She couldn't change everything at once, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better, something real. She got up from the bed and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. It was a beautiful sight, one that she had never imagined she would see from the inside of a house like this. And for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope that maybe she could belong here after all. I sat at the grand breakfast table the next morning, still unsure of what to expect. The soft golden light filtered through the large windows, casting a warm glow across the room. The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the air, something so foreign to me, yet so comforting. I was trying my best to let myself relax, but the weight of the past still lingered heavily on my shoulders. Alexander had been kind, too kind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this life, this place, wasn't truly meant for someone like me. My feet barely touched the ground as I sat at the table, still trying to process the kindness I had received. I watched Alexander as he spoke with the house staff, his voice calm and collected. He was the man who had everything, wealth, power, respect. And yet here I was, sitting in his home, a girl who had nothing but the clothes on her back. The contrast between our worlds felt like 1,000 miles. A few minutes later, Alexander set down his cup of coffee and turned to me, his gaze soft but serious. Are you okay, Anna? His voice was gentle, but there was a depth to it that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. I didn't know how to answer. Was I okay? I had been thrown into a world so far removed from the life I knew that I couldn't even begin to process everything. How could I possibly explain the turmoil in my chest, the fear of this kindness being taken away? I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. Yeah, I'm fine, I said quietly, the words tasting foreign on my tongue. It's just a lot to take in. Alexander seemed to understand. He didn't push me further. Instead, he simply smiled and gave a small nod, as though he respected my silence. Take all the time you need, he said. I looked down at my plate, the food in front of me untouched. My mind was still in a haze, trying to adjust to this new reality. I know this must be overwhelming, he added, breaking the silence once more. But I want you to understand that you don't have to hide here. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. I looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. I wasn't used to anyone speaking to me like that, especially not someone who had everything. People like him didn't usually talk to people like me. Thank you, I whispered, the words escaping me before I could stop them. It felt strange to say, but I meant it. Alexander smiled, but it wasn't the usual polite smile he gave to people. This one seemed different, warmer. You don't need to thank me, he said. I want to help. There was a long pause as I processed his words. I had never known what it was like to be helped without any strings attached. My life had been filled with people who had their own agendas, who only helped when there was something in it for them. But with Alexander, something felt different. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, or maybe it was the way he had taken me in without asking for anything in return. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I didn't have to fight this battle alone. Just as I started to feel a glimmer of hope, there was a knock on the door, and a housekeeper entered, carrying a small box. She placed it on the table in front of me. This was left for you, she said, her voice soft but polite. I looked at the box curiously, unsure of what to expect. I hadn't received anything like this in years. It felt like a gift, but I couldn't imagine who would have sent it. I opened the box carefully, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside, there was a small stuffed bear, its fur worn and its eyes a little dull from years of use. It looked like the kind of bear a child would treasure, and I realized with a start that it was the same bear I had seen in the alley where I had slept the night before. It was my bear, the one I had carried with me all these years, the one I had lost when I had to leave the alley in a hurry. I stared at it in disbelief, unable to comprehend how it had ended up here. I thought you might want it back, Alexander said quietly, his voice almost hesitant. He had been the one to find it, the one who had brought it here. My chest tightened as I reached for the bear, holding it in my hands. It was as if a piece of my past had just been returned to me, something familiar and comforting amidst all this uncertainty. I looked up at Alexander, my voice barely a whisper. How did you find it? He gave a small shrug, his expression soft. I remembered seeing it in the alley. I wanted to make sure you had it, just in case it meant something to you. For a moment, I was speechless. He hadn't just taken me in, he had cared enough to find my lost bear and bring it to me. The small act of kindness brought tears to my eyes, though I quickly blinked them away. I didn't want to seem weak. Thank you, I said again, this time with more conviction. You don't have to keep thanking me, he said, but his smile was genuine. It's the least I could do. I held the bear close to my chest, the warmth of it reminding me that maybe, just maybe, I had found a place where I could belong. But even as I let myself believe it, a part of me still held on to the fear. This kindness could disappear just as quickly as it had come, and I wasn't sure I was ready to trust that it wouldn't. But in that moment, I decided to let myself try, to let myself believe that I could finally be safe, even if it was just for a little while. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to heal. I sat at the grand dining table, the morning light spilling through the large windows and casting warm patterns on the polished wood floor. The house was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that came with wealth and comfort. But for me, it felt almost suffocating, like a world that didn't quite fit. I had never known a life like this. The plush chairs, the gleaming silverware, the perfectly arranged flowers in the vase at the center of the table, it was all so foreign to me. I glanced over at Alexander as he sat across from me, his eyes focused on his phone, but he seemed aware of my discomfort. He had been kind enough, offering me a room, food, and safety, but something still didn't feel right. Maybe it was the walls closing in or the knowledge that I didn't belong here. Maybe it was the fact that no matter how many nice things I had now, I was still just a girl from the streets, a girl who didn't know how to navigate this world. Alexander looked up from his phone, sensing my unease. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to burden him with the weight of my thoughts. "I'm fine," I said, though the words didn't feel true. Alexander studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp, but there was no judgment in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table as if he were weighing something. "I know this isn't easy," he said after a beat. "But I want you to know, you're not just a guest here. You're safe. You don't have to go back to what you were running from." His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. I nodded, but inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't deserve this safety. It felt too good to be true. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I could ever truly believe that things could be this simple. Alexander didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pushed his phone aside and reached for the cup of coffee in front of him. He took a slow sip, his eyes lingering on me for a moment before he spoke again. "I know it's a lot to take in, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself. I'm here, and so are the people around you. You're not alone." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But a part of me, the part that had survived the streets, the part that had learned to depend on nobody but myself, couldn't trust that kind of kindness. The streets had taught me to be wary, to not let my guard down, to never trust anyone completely. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. As I pushed my food around on the plate, trying to ignore the gnawing discomfort in my stomach, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A figure stood in the doorway, watching us. It was one of the housekeepers, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a stern expression. She held a clipboard in one hand, her eyes flicking between Alexander and me. "Excuse me, Mr. Stone," she said, her voice crisp and formal. "There's a call for you on line 1. Alexander nodded, standing up from the table and giving me a small smile. "I'll be right back. Feel free to take your time." As he left the room, I sat there, feeling more alone than ever. The silence stretched on, and the weight of the house pressed down on me. It was too quiet, too perfect. I missed the noise, the chaos, the life of the streets. At least on the streets, I knew what to expect. Here, I was a stranger in a world that seemed so far removed from the life I had known. I stood up from the table, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I couldn't stay here all day, hiding from the reality of the situation. I needed to feel like I was doing something, anything. I wandered through the halls of the mansion, my footsteps echoing in the large, empty space. The walls were lined with paintings and sculptures, the kind of art I had only ever seen in magazines or on TV. I felt out of place, like a child playing dress-up in an adult's world. My eyes landed on the library at the end of the hall, its doors slightly ajar. Something about the room called to me, so I walked toward it, pushing the door open slowly. Inside, the room was filled with the smell of old books and polished wood. The shelves were lined with hundreds of books, their spines neatly arranged. I stepped inside, running my fingers along the spines, feeling the cool leather and the soft texture of the pages through the glass. It felt familiar in a way. Books had always been my escape, the one thing I could rely on when everything else was falling apart. I pulled a book from the shelf at random, a thick novel with gold lettering on the spine. I didn't know why I chose it, but it felt right. I flipped through the pages, the words drawing me in. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until I heard a voice behind me. "I see you found the library," Alexander said, standing in the doorway with a smile. I turned to face him, holding the book in my hands. "I needed something to do," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Alexander's smile softened, and he stepped into the room, his eyes flicking to the book in my hands. "I'm glad you found it. I figured you might like it here. There's a lot more where that came from." I nodded, but I couldn't help the small pang of guilt that twisted in my stomach. I was grateful, but I still didn't feel like I belonged. It was hard to accept kindness when you were used to doing everything for yourself. "I'll leave you to it," Alexander said, stepping back toward the door. "If you need anything, just let me know." As he left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of something. Something big, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to take the leap. I wasn't sure if I could ever trust that this life could be mine, that I could truly be a part of it. I looked down at the book in my hands and took a deep breath. Maybe, just maybe, I could start to believe that things could be different. But for now, I was still scared, still unsure. And that was okay. I spent the next few days adjusting to life inside Alexander's mansion, but the adjustment wasn't as easy as I had hoped. Everything was so new, so polished, that I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. I wandered from room to room, unsure of where to go, or if I even belonged here. Alexander had told me I was safe, that I didn't need to worry, but I couldn't help feeling like an intruder. It wasn't just the size of the house or the quiet luxury. It was the weight of the life I had left behind. It was hard to forget the streets, the alleyways, the constant struggle to survive. I'd lived in survival mode for so long, it was all I knew. I had spent so many years watching my back, trusting no one, depending on no one. Now, I was here, in a mansion filled with warmth and kindness, but I wasn't sure if I could ever truly be a part of it. I woke up one morning to the smell of bacon and eggs drifting into the guest room, reminding me of the mornings I used to spend with my mom, back before everything fell apart. It was a fleeting memory, one that made my chest ache. But I shook it off. There was no time for memories. No time for regrets. I had to figure out what to do next. I walked downstairs and found Alexander already at the table, reading through a stack of papers. He looked up when I entered, offering a small smile. "Good morning, Anna," he said. "How did you sleep?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I slept fine," I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. I still felt like I was living in someone else's world. Alexander didn't seem to mind my silence. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, putting the papers down and gesturing to the seat across from him. "I thought we could have breakfast together today." I sat down, the smell of the food making my stomach growl, but I didn't feel hungry. I picked at the eggs on my plate, still lost in my own thoughts. "You don't have to stay here forever, you know," Alexander said, his voice quiet. "I mean, you don't have to make any decisions right away. I want you to take your time, figure out what's best for you. But I'm here if you need anything." His words were kind, but they left me feeling uneasy. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay here. I didn't know if I could stay here. I missed the chaos of the streets, the familiarity of my old life, even if it had been full of hardship. At least there, I knew how to survive. I had been living in a world where every decision, every day, was a fight. I didn't know how to live any other way. Alexander seemed to sense my hesitation. "It's okay to be unsure," he said, his tone soft. "Take your time. There's no rush. But whatever you decide, I want you to know that you don't have to do it alone." I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure if I could trust that. I wasn't sure if I could ever feel like I belonged here. I stood up from the table, unable to sit still. "I think I'll go for a walk," I said, almost as much to myself as to him. Alexander gave me a knowing look, then nodded. "All right, take your time. I'll be here when you get back." I left the house, stepping out into the crisp morning air. The world outside felt so different, so open compared to the life I had known. The neighborhood was quiet, with neatly kept lawns and houses that seemed so perfect, so untouched. I wandered down the street, unsure of where I was headed. I was lost in my thoughts when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a woman walking toward me, her expression warm and friendly. She was older, probably in her late 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She smiled as she approached. "You must be Anna," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm Claire, Alexander's housekeeper." I nodded, feeling a little self-conscious. "It's nice to meet you," I said quietly. Claire's smile widened. "I thought I'd come out and introduce myself. You've been here a few days, and I just wanted to make sure you felt comfortable. You're safe here, you know. We're all here for you." I wasn't sure how to respond. I was still trying to wrap my head around everything, still trying to adjust to a life that felt like a dream. But Claire's words were reassuring, and something in her voice made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. "Thank you," I said, feeling a little lighter. Claire smiled. "You're welcome. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always around." She gave me a gentle pat on the arm before turning to leave. I watched her walk back toward the house, feeling a bit of comfort in her words. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I spent the rest of the afternoon walking around the neighborhood, trying to clear my head. There was so much I needed to figure out, but it was hard to focus with so many conflicting feelings swirling inside me. I had never had a choice before. Life had always been about surviving, about getting by, no matter the cost. But now I had a choice. I could stay, I could build a new life. But was that what I wanted? As the sun began to set, I made my way back to the mansion. When I stepped inside, I was met by the warmth of the house, the scent of dinner cooking in the kitchen. Alexander was in the living room, his back to me as he read something on his phone. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Welcome back," he said with a smile. "Did you enjoy your walk?" I nodded, trying to hide the uncertainty in my expression. "Yeah, it was good," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the chance to figure it out. And that, at least, was a start. I had been staying at Alexander's mansion for several weeks now, and though I had started to settle in, the unease inside me never fully went away. It wasn't just the luxury that surrounded me. It was the constant reminder of the life I had left behind. Every time I walked through the grand hallways or sat at the massive dining table, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. It wasn't that Alexander had made me feel unwelcome. He had been kind, even beyond what I could have ever expected. It was just that I couldn't quite shake off the person I had been. The girl who had spent so many nights alone in alleys. The girl who had learned to survive on her own. The girl who couldn't trust anyone. I was still that girl, even if the mansion's warmth tried to tell me otherwise. I had been trying to avoid talking about my past. I never knew what to say. The truth was too painful, too raw, and I wasn't ready to share it. But Alexander had a way of getting under my defenses. He had a way of making me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could trust him. One evening, after a long day of wandering around the estate, I found myself sitting in the library. The shelves of books, the comfortable chairs, the warm light from the chandelier. It all felt so peaceful, so different from everything I had known. But the peace only lasted so long. I couldn't silence the thoughts in my head. I still wasn't sure what to do. I had no idea where I was going, what my future would look like. I couldn't go back to my old life, but I wasn't sure I could stay here either. As I sat there, lost in thought, I heard a quiet knock at the door. I didn't move at first, assuming it was just someone coming to check on me. But the knock came again, a little louder this time. "Come in," I called softly. The door opened, and Alexander stepped inside. His presence immediately filled the room, warm and comforting. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice gentle. I shook my head, motioning to the chair beside me. "Of course." He sat down, his eyes studying me for a moment before speaking. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Are you okay?" I wanted to say I was fine, that everything was okay, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I wasn't fine. I wasn't sure I ever would be. I shifted in my seat, not quite meeting his gaze. "I don't know," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do." Alexander's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't just kindness. There was understanding in his eyes. "I get it," he said quietly. "It's not easy to just let go of everything you've known. And you don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one day at a time." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. His words, so simple, but they carried a weight of comfort that I hadn't realized I needed. I had been carrying so much for so long, and for the first time, someone was telling me it was okay to let go, to not have all the answers. "I don't want to be a burden," I said, my voice shaky. "I don't want to stay here if I'm just taking up space." Alexander looked at me, his expression serious but kind. "You're not a burden, Anna," he said firmly. "You don't take up space, you fill it. You bring something here that I haven't seen in a long time. You remind me of what really matters." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've been focused on work for so long, on building this life that I thought would make me happy. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the things that actually matter. You came here, and you reminded me that there's more to life than wealth and success. You've been through so much, and yet you still have the strength to keep going. That's not something everyone can do." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had never thought of myself that way, never thought of myself as strong. I had always been just a survivor, someone who did what she had to do to make it through the day. But hearing Alexander say it like that, it made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. "I don't know if I can stay here," I said after a long pause. "I don't know if I belong here." Alexander's gaze softened even more, and he leaned forward slightly. "You belong here as much as anyone else," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not just a guest, Anna. You're part of this. You have a place here, and you always will. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't ready to cry. Not yet. But his words, they made something inside me stir. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the tiniest spark of belief that I could actually have a future, one where I wasn't constantly running from my past. I didn't know what that future looked like, but I wanted to find out. Thank you, I whispered. Alexander smiled, and it was a smile that seemed to reach his eyes. Anytime, Anna. Anytime. As I sat there, looking at him, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. Maybe I could stay here. Maybe I could belong. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew that for the first time in a long time, I had a chance to figure it out. And that was enough for now. I woke up to a morning that felt like any other. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow over the room as I sat up, stretching the tension from my muscles. For the past few days, I had been trying to get used to my new life at Alexander's mansion, but the feeling of displacement still lingered. The mansion was beautiful, too beautiful, in fact. Everything was polished and perfect, and yet, something about it didn't feel real. I wasn't used to being surrounded by wealth, luxury, and warmth. The streets were my home, not this sprawling estate. I still couldn't get used to the idea that I wasn't just a guest here. Alexander had been kind enough to open his doors to me, but I couldn't help feeling like an intruder. I had spent my entire life living with uncertainty, and now, in a place that offered me everything, I was still uncertain. I was still the same girl from the streets. The same girl who had learned to trust no one. The same girl who had survived because she had no other choice. I walked to the window, looking out over the manicured gardens below. It was so different from the city I had known, the streets I had walked for so long. The contrast was almost too much to bear. I had never thought I would end up in a place like this. It felt like a dream I was too afraid to wake up from. As I stood there, lost in my thoughts, I heard a knock at the door. I turned, surprised. "Come in," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The door opened, and Alexander stepped inside. He had a soft smile on his face, though his eyes were serious. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "How did you sleep?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. "I slept well," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was the truth. I had slept, but my mind had been restless, tossing and turning in the unfamiliarity of it all. "I'm glad," Alexander said, stepping further into the room. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for you to start school." I blinked, surprised by the suggestion. "School?" I echoed, feeling a little overwhelmed. It hadn't crossed my mind that I might go back to school. The thought felt foreign, almost impossible. "Yes," he said, his tone gentle but insistent. "I know it's been a while, but I think it could be a good step forward. You don't have to stay here forever, Anna. You have the chance to build something for yourself. School is a start." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. How could I go to school? I hadn't been to a proper school in years. I had dropped out long ago, too busy trying to survive to worry about education. But now, in this strange new world, I had the chance to start over. I could go to school. I could have a future. Alexander watched me carefully, as if waiting for me to process his words. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. "But I wanted to give you the option. You deserve to have a choice in what happens next." I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. It wasn't just the idea of going to school that overwhelmed me. It was the idea of trusting this life. Of trusting Alexander. I had spent my whole life fending for myself. I had learned to survive by keeping my guard up, by never letting anyone in. And now, I was supposed to let this man into my life. Let him help me? I wasn't sure I was ready for that. "I don't know if I can," I said finally, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I can trust this." "Trust you." Alexander sat down beside me, his presence steady and calm. "I understand," he said softly. "It's not easy to trust after everything you've been through. But I'm not asking you to trust me all at once. I'm asking you to take it one step at a time. You don't have to make any big decisions right now. But I want you to know that I'm here. And I'll always be here." I looked at him, searching his face for any hint of dishonesty. But all I saw was sincerity. There was no agenda behind his words, no hidden motive. It was just him offering me a chance I had never had before. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. "I'm scared," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can do this." Alexander's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. It's okay to be scared, he said gently. But you don't have to do it alone. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. A way to start over, to build something new. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone who cared, someone who was willing to help me, even if it meant taking small steps. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe I could start to trust again. Okay, I said softly, finally meeting his gaze. I'll try. I'll try to trust you. Alexander smiled, his eyes brightening with relief. That's all I'm asking. The weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter now. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the chance to make a choice, to take control of my own future. And that was enough for me, for now. I woke up the next morning feeling a strange sense of resolve in my chest. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. Alexander had given me a chance, a real chance to rebuild my life. And for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. The night before, I had told him I would try to trust him. And I meant it. It wasn't going to be easy, and I still didn't know if I could truly let go of my past, but I was willing to try. That's all I could do, right? Try. The house was quieter than usual when I got up. It wasn't that I expected noise, but I had gotten used to the emptiness. I made my way to the kitchen, drawn by the familiar smell of coffee. As I walked into the room, I saw Alexander sitting at the table, looking over some papers. His presence felt reassuring, grounding, like the anchor I had been searching for without even realizing it. He looked up when I entered, his eyes softening when he saw me. "Morning," he said, his voice warm, but with a hint of something more. "How are you feeling today?" I hesitated, still not quite sure how to answer. How was I supposed to feel? This place was so different from everything I had ever known. But I knew the right answer was somewhere inside me, even if I couldn't quite find it yet. "Better," I said finally, offering him a small smile. "I'm still figuring things out." Alexander nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. "That's okay," he said, pushing the papers aside. "No rush. You can take all the time you need." I sat down across from him, the warmth of the kitchen enveloping me like a blanket. I wasn't used to this feeling, being cared for without strings attached. Alexander had given me that, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel a little bit of hope. "I've been thinking about what you said." I began, my voice quieter than usual. "About going to school." Alexander raised an eyebrow, looking at me with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Really?" he asked, his tone gentle. "I know it's a big step." I continued, fidgeting with the edge of my sleeve. "But I think, maybe I could try. I want to try. I don't want to stay in this limbo forever." Alexander's expression softened, and for a moment, I saw the glimmer of something proud in his eyes. "I think that's a great idea, Anna," he said, his voice sincere. "You deserve the chance to learn, to have opportunities that you might not have had before. I'll help you with whatever you need." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into my heart. I had been living with the fear of not being good enough, of not deserving this kind of life. But for the first time, someone had told me that I did deserve it, that I was worthy of more than just surviving. I stood up, a sense of determination filling me. "I'll make the phone call," I said, more to myself than to Alexander. "I'll see what I need to do to get enrolled." Alexander smiled, his eyes warm with pride. "Take your time, but I'll be here to help if you need it." I felt a rush of gratitude in that moment. I had come to this mansion unsure of what the future held, and now, for the first time in a long time, I could see a path forward. I had been given a second chance, a real chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. As I walked out of the kitchen, I felt a spark of excitement. The world that had once seemed so big and scary now felt like it might be something I could conquer. I wasn't sure what was ahead, but I knew that I was no longer alone in facing it. I had someone in my corner. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, forms, and paperwork. I had to get used to the idea of being a student again, something that felt foreign after so many years of not attending school. But as the days went by, I started to feel a sense of purpose. I started to feel like I was building something again, something solid, something real. Alexander was supportive every step of the way, and with his help, I had everything I needed to get started. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I was beginning to let go of the fear that had held me back for so long. I was beginning to believe that maybe I could build a future. Maybe I wasn't just a girl from the streets anymore. Maybe I could be something more. The first day of school came faster than I expected. I had all my supplies ready, my new backpack, my notebooks, everything. It felt like the first day of a new chapter, but I was still nervous. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I didn't fit in? I had spent so long on my own that the idea of being in a classroom, surrounded by people who hadn't lived my life, felt overwhelming. But Alexander reassured me every step of the way. "You'll do great," he said, giving me a quick smile. "Just be yourself." It was the same advice he had given me when I first came here. Be yourself. Maybe it was simple, but it was all I needed to hear. When I walked into the school building, I felt the weight of all my fears pressing down on me. But I also felt something else, a small, quiet sense of hope. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to face it. I wasn't going to let fear dictate my life anymore. This was my chance, and I was going to take it. I walked into the classroom, feeling the weight of my nerves settle in my chest. The school was large, much bigger than any school I'd ever been to, with wide hallways and classrooms that seemed to stretch on forever. The floors were shiny, the walls decorated with posters of achievements and upcoming events. It felt like a place where dreams were supposed to be made, not shattered. But for me, it was a reminder of how much I had to catch up on. I wasn't sure I belonged here. I had spent years out of school, too busy surviving to think about education. Now, I was supposed to be a student again, sitting in a classroom full of strangers, some of whom probably hadn't seen the kind of life I had. I wasn't sure how they would react to me, or what they would think when they found out who I really was. But I was here, and I had to at least try. I could already feel the eyes of the other students on me as I walked to my seat. It wasn't just curiosity, it was judgment. They didn't know me, they didn't know my past, but I could feel it. I could feel the way they looked at me like I didn't belong. The teacher, Mrs. Larson, was standing at the front of the room, talking about the schedule for the year. She gave me a warm smile when I walked in, like she had been expecting me. "Welcome," she said. "We're happy to have you join us." I nodded, trying to smile back, but my hands were shaking. I sat down at a desk in the middle of the room, trying to make myself as small as possible. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to blend in, to be invisible, but it felt impossible. Every time I looked up, I could feel the stares, the whispering behind my back. I tried to focus on the lesson, but my mind kept wandering. The words blurred together, and the numbers on the board didn't make any sense. I was lost, completely lost, in a world that felt like it was moving too fast for me to catch up. My eyes kept flickering to the clock, counting down the minutes until I could leave, until I could escape back to the safety of Alexander's mansion. I didn't know what I was doing here, what I was supposed to be learning. I had never been given the chance to be a normal kid, to have a normal life. School was just another thing I had to fake my way through. I had no idea how to fit in. I had spent too many years running from the truth, hiding behind the walls I had built around myself. It wasn't just the school that felt foreign. It was the whole idea of living a life where I wasn't just surviving, but actually trying to thrive. But I wasn't sure how to do that. I wasn't sure if I even knew how to be a kid anymore. After what felt like an eternity, the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the period. I grabbed my things quickly, eager to leave the room before anyone could say anything else. But as I walked toward the door, someone called my name. "Hey, wait up." I turned around to see a girl standing by the desk. She was about my age, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and a friendly smile on her face. "I'm Rachel," she said. "I saw you were new, so I thought I'd introduce myself." I stared at her, unsure of what to say. My heart was still pounding from the anxiety of being in the classroom, and now someone wanted to talk to me? "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Anna." She nodded, taking a step closer. "I figured you might be new. I don't think I've seen you around before. Are you okay? You seemed a little off." I could feel my chest tightening, the familiar walls rising up. I didn't want to explain myself. I didn't want to talk about my past. "I'm fine," I said quickly. Just not used to being here." Rachel smiled again, and I could see the genuine warmth in her eyes. "I get it," she said. "It's a lot to take in. But don't worry, you'll get the hang of it. This place can be a little overwhelming at first, but once you get to know people, it's not so bad." I nodded, unsure of what to say next. Rachel seemed nice enough, but I wasn't sure if I could trust anyone here. I had always kept people at a distance, never letting anyone get too close. I wasn't ready to let anyone in. Well, Rachel continued, if you ever want to hang out or need help with anything, just let me know. I can show you around. I forced a smile, trying to push past the discomfort I felt. Thanks, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I could take her up on the offer, but it felt nice to know that someone was offering a hand. For the first time that day, I felt like maybe I didn't have to face everything alone. I didn't have to be the girl who kept running from everyone and everything. Maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Each class felt like it was dragging on forever, but Rachel was there, occasionally glancing over and offering me a smile. I didn't know if I was ready to make friends. I didn't know if I could trust them, but I also knew that I didn't want to be alone anymore. I was tired of hiding. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, I found Rachel waiting for me outside the classroom. Hey, you want to grab lunch tomorrow? She asked. We can sit together. For the first time since I got here, I didn't feel like I was sinking. I didn't feel so alone. Yeah, I said, my voice a little steadier than before. I'd like that. I didn't know where this would lead, but in that moment, I felt like maybe I could be part of something. Maybe I wasn't so different after all. Maybe I could learn to trust again. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was willing to find out. I walked into the kitchen the next morning, feeling a little more at ease than I had the day before. School had been a challenge, but it had also been a reminder of how much I still had to learn, how much I could grow. Rachel's offer to sit together had felt like a small, but significant step. I didn't know if I was ready for friendships or if I could let my guard down, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel entirely alone. I was still scared, still uncertain, but something in me had started to shift. The house was quieter than usual when I entered the kitchen, the soft hum of the coffee machine filling the silence. Alexander was sitting at the table, as usual, reading through papers. His gaze lifted when he noticed me, a soft smile spreading across his face. Morning, Anna, he greeted me warmly. How's the day treating you so far? I smiled back, not quite as nervous as I usually was. It's been good, I replied. A little overwhelming, but good. Alexander nodded, as if understanding. I know it's a lot to take in, but you're doing great. Just take it one step at a time. His words were comforting, and I nodded, appreciating his support. He had been nothing but patient with me since I arrived, never pushing me to move faster than I was comfortable with. And that made all the difference. The silence between us stretched for a moment as I made myself a cup of coffee. I wasn't used to this kind of calm, this kind of peace. The quiet in the kitchen felt strange, almost unnatural, but it was starting to feel like a place I could be. I've been thinking, Alexander said after a while, setting his papers aside. You've made a lot of progress since you've been here, and I know you've had a rough start, but I think it might be time to start talking about the next steps. I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this was going. What do you mean by next steps? I asked. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. I mean, you've been through a lot, and I want to help you get to where you want to be. It might be time to start thinking about long-term goals, what you want for yourself, for your future. His words made my stomach twist. I hadn't thought about the future. All I had thought about was surviving day by day, getting through the next moment, the next hour. I had never allowed myself to think beyond that. I don't know, I said softly. I never really had a future to think about. Alexander's gaze softened, and he leaned forward, his voice low. You do now, and you don't have to do it alone. I felt a lump form in my throat at his words. I wasn't used to having someone believe in me, let alone someone with so much power and influence. It made me feel small and insignificant, but at the same time, it made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I had the chance to be something more. I didn't know what that was, but I was starting to hope that I could find out. I've always just focused on getting by, I said, my voice shaky. I've never really had the chance to think about what comes after that. Alexander gave me a sympathetic look. And now you do. You can think about whatever you want, Anna. Whatever makes you happy. It was a simple statement, but it hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so many years thinking only about survival, about getting through the next day, that I had forgotten what it felt like to want something more. To dream. You have a lot of potential, Alexander continued, his voice steady. You just need the space to find it. And I want to give you that space. I nodded slowly, processing his words. I had never been given the opportunity to dream before. I had been too busy surviving to think about anything else. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to start. I don't know where to start, I admitted, my voice soft. I don't know what I want. Alexander smiled kindly. That's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But we can start by thinking about the things you enjoy, the things that make you happy. It might be a good idea to explore different things, different interests, different passions, and see what sticks. I looked at him, a little overwhelmed by the thought of it all. What if I don't find anything? I asked, my voice filled with doubt. What if I can't figure it out? Alexander's smile never wavered. You will, he said confidently. It takes time, and it's okay to take small steps. The important thing is that you try, and that you don't give up. His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what it might feel like to not just survive, but to thrive. I didn't know what the future held, but I wasn't as afraid of it as I had been before. Maybe I could finally start thinking about what I wanted, what I dreamed of, without the constant fear that it would be taken away. I'll try, I said quietly, my voice filled with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. Alexander's smile widened, and I saw pride in his eyes. That's all I ask, he said softly. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, but I knew one thing. For the first time in my life, I had the chance to build it. And I wasn't going to let fear hold me back anymore. I had been feeling more settled in the mansion, more at home than I had ever felt before. The days had started to blur together, and I was finding myself adjusting to the rhythm of the house, to the calmness that Alexander had created around me. But even as I settled into this new life, I still couldn't fully shake the nagging feeling that it was all too good to be true, that something would come along to shatter this fragile peace I had found. I had learned to survive by being prepared for the worst, by expecting the unexpected. And now, as I sat at the table with Alexander, listening to him talk about plans for the future, I couldn't help but wonder if I was still living in the shadow of my past. You're doing really well, Anna, Alexander said, his voice calm and encouraging. I'm really proud of how far you've come. You've taken the first step toward building a life you deserve. I smiled at him, but there was a part of me that didn't feel like I deserved his praise. Sure, I was trying, but what if I wasn't enough? What if I failed? What if I wasn't capable of building the life he believed I could have? The thought gnawed at me, and I couldn't push it aside. I'm trying, I said quietly. But sometimes, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Like maybe I don't belong here. Alexander's gaze softened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. It's okay to feel that way, he said gently. You've been through a lot. You've had to fight for everything. But now you don't have to fight alone. You have the space to breathe, to take your time. You have the chance to be who you really are. I nodded, but the words didn't fully reach me. It was easy for him to say. He had everything, a life filled with opportunity and stability. I had spent so long in survival mode that the idea of letting go of my fear, of trusting that I could really have a future, felt like stepping into a world that didn't belong to me. Later that day, Alexander told me that he had arranged for a meeting with a career counselor, someone who could help me figure out what I wanted to do with my future. The idea of having someone to guide me through the next steps was comforting, but it also made my heart race. I had never been asked to think about my future, to consider what I wanted to be, what I could achieve. I had always been focused on getting through the next day, the next moment. To think about years ahead, about plans and goals, it was overwhelming. But I knew that if I was going to move forward, I had to stop living in the shadows of my past. I had to start making decisions. So, when the day came for the meeting, I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the nerves that were creeping up inside me. The counselor's office was warm, comfortable, with soft chairs and a desk filled with pamphlets and brochures. The counselor, a woman named Mrs. Harris, was kind and patient, her smile welcoming and her voice steady. She immediately put me at ease, making it clear that I wasn't expected to have everything figured out. We'll take it slow, she said. You don't have to make any big decisions today. We're just here to talk, to explore your interests, and to see what you're passionate about. I nodded, feeling a little more at ease. She asked me questions about my past, about the things I enjoyed, the things I had always wanted to do but never had the chance to pursue. It was strange to talk about myself, to talk about the things that made me feel alive. For so long, I had been focused on survival, on just making it through each day. But now, with her encouragement, I began to open up. I've always liked art, I said, my voice quieter now. I used to draw when I was younger, but I never had the chance to do much with it. Mrs. Harris smiled, her eyes lighting up. Art is a wonderful outlet for creativity. Have you thought about exploring it more? Taking some classes, maybe even pursuing it professionally? The idea of pursuing art felt like a dream. It was something I had always wanted to do, but I had never thought it was possible. I had never thought I deserved it. But hearing Mrs. Harris say it out loud made something inside me stir. Maybe it was possible. Maybe I could take that step. Maybe I could find a way to build a future that was mine, one where I wasn't just surviving, but thriving. I'm not sure, I said, still unsure of myself. I don't know if I'm good enough. I've never had the chance to really try. Mrs. Harris leaned forward slightly, her expression gentle. It's never too late to try, Anna. You have so much potential, and you don't have to have all the answers right now. You're on the right path. Her words, though simple, resonated deeply with me. For the first time, I felt like I had permission to dream, to pursue something just for myself. I had spent so much of my life fighting, trying to survive, but now I was being given the chance to build something new. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but I was willing to try. As I left the counselor's office, I felt a shift inside me, a spark of possibility. It wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't have to do it alone. I had Alexander's support, and now I had a plan. The future was still uncertain, but I was ready to take the first step toward it. I wasn't just a girl from the streets anymore. I was someone with a future, with choices, and that made all the difference. I woke up the next morning feeling a little lighter, a little less burdened. I had taken a step, a real step toward building a future, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like I had direction. The counselor, Mrs. Harris, had planted a seed in my mind that I couldn't shake. The idea of pursuing art, of taking something I loved and turning it into something real, had felt impossible just days ago. Now, it felt like the only thing worth doing. I wasn't sure if I was good enough, if I could make it, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to try. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, studying my reflection. I was no longer just the girl from the streets. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first stepped into Alexander's mansion. I had changed. Maybe not completely, but enough to feel like I was someone who had a future. I was still scared, still unsure of myself, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had come too far. As I walked down the grand staircase into the kitchen, I saw Alexander sitting at the table, flipping through some papers. He looked up when I entered, his face lighting up with that familiar smile. "Good morning," he said, setting the papers aside. "How are you feeling today?" I sat down across from him, a smile tugging at my lips. "Better," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the next steps." Alexander's eyes softened, his gaze attentive. And I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I want to try. I want to take the art classes, see where it leads. I want to see if it's something I can really do." The words felt like they were finally coming from a place of certainty, not fear. Alexander's smile grew wider, and I could see the pride in his eyes. "I think that's a great decision," he said, his voice full of encouragement. "You've got so much potential, Anna. I'm glad you're taking the leap." For the first time in my life, I believed him. I had always been the one who had to take care of myself, the one who couldn't afford to trust anyone. But Alexander had shown me that there were people who genuinely wanted to help, who cared about my future. "Thank you," I whispered, not quite believing that I had gotten to this point. "I couldn't have done it without you." Alexander chuckled softly. "You did the hard part. I'm just here to help where I can." I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for everything he had done. I wasn't just a project to him. I was someone he believed in. And that belief, more than anything, was what was starting to change my world. Later that day, I went to the local art center to sign up for the classes. As I walked in, the smell of fresh paint and the sound of brushes against canvas filled the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. This was what I had been missing, something to pour my heart into. The instructor, a woman named Ms. Taylor, welcomed me warmly. She was older, with streaks of gray in her hair, but her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Welcome to the class," she said, shaking my hand. "We're glad to have you here." I nodded, feeling a little overwhelmed. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I was ready. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the classes. Every brushstroke, every sketch, felt like a release. I was finally doing something for myself, something that didn't involve just surviving, but actually creating, building something from scratch. It wasn't easy, though. I struggled with self-doubt, especially when it came to my art. I didn't have the formal training others had, and sometimes I felt like I was out of my depth. But every time I doubted myself, I thought about Alexander's words. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time. Slowly, I began to improve. The more I painted, the more confident I became. My pieces started to take shape, and for the first time, I saw something. That was mine, something I had created. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that felt like a victory in itself. As the weeks passed, I found myself opening up to the other students in the class. Rachel, who had been my first real friend since I arrived at the mansion, often came to the classes with me. She was supportive, always encouraging me when I doubted myself. She never judged me for my lack of experience. Instead, she celebrated my progress. It felt good to have someone in my corner, someone who believed in me. One afternoon, after class, Rachel and I walked to a nearby cafe. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the city, and for the first time, I felt like I was living in the moment, not just surviving it. As we sat down with our drinks, Rachel looked at me, her smile soft. "I'm proud of you, Anna," she said. "You've come so far." I looked at her, surprised by her words. "I don't feel like I've come that far," I admitted. "I'm still figuring things out." Rachel shook her head. "But that's the point, right? You're trying. You're pushing yourself. And that's what matters." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. For so long, I had been scared of trying, scared of failing. But now, with Rachel by my side, with Alexander's support, I was learning to take those steps, no matter how small. "I guess you're right," I said, the words coming easier now. "I'm trying." And that was enough. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready to face it. I was no longer just a girl who had been left behind. I was someone who had a chance. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to take it. I had spent months feeling like I was walking on eggshells, unsure of where my life was headed. But now, something had shifted. I was starting to see the possibility of a future I had never dreamed of before. The days were blending together, filled with art classes, quiet mornings with Alexander, and the simple rhythm of a life that wasn't constantly in survival mode. It felt good, better than I could have imagined. But as much as I wanted to believe I was past the worst of it, I knew there was still so much ahead of me. The past always had a way of catching up. One afternoon, as I sat in the library with a sketchbook in front of me, lost in thought, I heard a knock on the door. It was Alexander. He had an odd look on his face, one I had never seen before. "Concern. Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, his voice unusually serious. I closed my sketchbook, sensing that something was wrong. "Of course," I said, putting it aside. Alexander stepped inside and closed the door behind him, his eyes fixed on me as he sat across from me. There was something heavy in the air, something I couldn't put my finger on. "I need to ask you something," he began, his voice steady but tinged with an unspoken worry. "Have you heard from your family lately?" I froze. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. My family. I had been trying to avoid thinking about them, trying to bury that part of myself. The truth was, I hadn't heard from them in months. I had barely thought about them since I'd come to live with Alexander. But now, sitting here, the memories came rushing back. My mom, my old life, the chaos. "No," I said, my voice quiet, barely above a whisper. "I haven't heard from them." Alexander's gaze softened. "I'm sorry to bring it up. I just thought you should know that I've been in contact with a few people who might be able to help with finding your family." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean? What do you want to do?" Alexander paused, taking a breath. "I know this might be a difficult conversation for you, but I think it's important to at least try. We don't have to go looking for them, but if you want to, we can start the process. If there's any chance of getting in touch with them, I can help you. But I need to know if that's something you want." I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of his words. I had spent so long trying to move forward, trying to let go of the past. The idea of reaching out to my family, to dredge up the memories of the life I had left behind, felt like stepping into a storm I wasn't ready to face. But at the same time, something inside me was stirring, a longing I hadn't acknowledged before. "I don't know," I said, my voice cracking. "I haven't wanted to think about them." They were never there for me. I don't know if I want to open that door again. Alexander nodded, as if he understood. You don't have to decide right now, but I want you to know that you have options. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But whatever you choose, I'll be here for you. You don't have to go through it alone. His words gave me a small sense of relief, but the fear still gnawed at me. I wasn't ready to confront my past, not yet. I wasn't sure I ever would be. But I also realized that I couldn't keep running forever. I had come so far, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to face the truth. Can I think about it? I asked, my voice trembling. Alexander smiled, that calm and reassuring smile that had become so familiar to me. Of course. Take your time. He stood up, walking to the door. Just know that I'm here when you're ready to talk. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. As he left the room, I sat there in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. I had spent so long trying to outrun my past, trying to forget where I came from. But maybe it was time to confront it, to see if there was any possibility of healing. The decision was mine to make, and it wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to face it alone. I had someone in my corner. I wasn't sure what the next step would be, but I knew that I had the strength to take it. I wasn't the same girl who had arrived at Alexander's mansion months ago. I was stronger, more capable, and more willing to face the future, whatever it held. That evening, as I sat by the window, looking out at the sunset, I felt a mixture of hope and fear. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew that I was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. I had spent the last few weeks living in a bubble, a strange and unexpected world that felt both like a dream and a distant reality. The decision to confront my past had been the hardest thing I had done since arriving at Alexander's mansion, but it was also the most liberating. With his support, I had started to reach out to old contacts, trying to trace any part of my family that might still be out there. The process was slow, and there were many moments of uncertainty, but each small step felt like progress. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I was determined to see it through. As I sat on the balcony one evening, looking out over the vast estate, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. My life had been defined by survival for so long, and now, I was starting to build something more, something that wasn't just about getting by. Alexander had given me that opportunity, and I was beginning to understand how much that meant. He had told me that I didn't have to go through this alone, and it was a promise he had kept every single day. His kindness, his belief in me, was something I had never known before. But as much as I wanted to believe in it, there was a part of me that still held back. It was the fear, the same fear that had kept me alive all these years. The fear that everything I had started to build could be taken away in an instant. I wasn't used to stability. I wasn't used to people genuinely caring about me, and the thought of losing that, losing this life I had started to love, scared me more than anything. That evening, I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Alexander approaching. His expression was serious, but there was a softness in his eyes that made me relax. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside me. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could fully express how I felt. The truth was, I was a whirlwind of emotions. "Yeah, I'm just thinking," I said quietly. "About everything. About what comes next." Alexander was silent for a moment, his gaze following mine as we both stared out over the estate. "I get it," he said finally. "It's a lot to take in. But you've come a long way. You've made a choice to move forward, and that's not easy." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It feels like I'm walking a tightrope," I admitted. One wrong move, and I could fall back into the same life I had before. Alexander turned to face me, his eyes locked on mine. "You're not alone in this, Anna," he said softly. "You've got me, and you've got yourself. That's more than enough to keep moving forward." I looked at him, unsure of how to respond. His confidence in me, in us, was something I had never known before, and it made me want to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could start trusting again. "I don't want to lose this," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I don't want to go back to the way things were." Alexander placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me in that moment. "You won't," he said with conviction. "You've already made the choice. You're stronger than you think, Anna. I've seen it in you every day, and you're not going back. Not unless you want to." His words, so simple, yet so powerful, settled deep within me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't that same girl anymore. Maybe I was stronger. Maybe I had the strength to build the life I deserved. I took a deep breath, the air cool in my lungs as I let go of some of the weight I had been carrying. It wasn't easy. Nothing ever was. But I was starting to understand that the future wasn't as scary as I had once thought. I didn't have to fear it. I didn't have to fight it. I just had to take it one step at a time. Later that evening, as I was finishing up some sketches in the library, I heard the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. I didn't think much of it at first, but when the door opened and I heard voices, I felt my heart skip a beat. My mind immediately went to the idea that something might be wrong, that maybe the past was catching up with me. But as I walked toward the front door, I saw a familiar face, one I hadn't expected. It was Rachel, standing with a woman I didn't recognize. Rachel looked over and smiled when she saw me. "Anna," she called out. "I've got someone here who's been looking for you." My heart raced, my thoughts spinning. Looking for me? Who could it be? The woman next to Rachel stepped forward, her expression warm and open. "Hi," she said softly, extending her hand. "I'm Mrs. Johnson. I've been working with some of your contacts to find you." I froze. My contacts? I hadn't expected anyone from my past to show up here. I wasn't ready for this. But as I looked at Mrs. Johnson, something in her face told me she wasn't here to cause trouble. "I've been trying to find your family," she continued, her voice gentle. "I have some news. I think we might have located your mother." My heart skipped a beat, a wave of shock washing over me. I hadn't heard from my mother in so long. I had stopped thinking about her, convinced she was lost to me forever. But now, standing in front of me, was the possibility that she was out there, still alive. And that thought sent a flood of emotions rushing through me. Fear, hope, confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mrs. Johnson smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "It's a long story," she said, her voice kind. "But I think we can make some contact. If you're ready." I looked at Rachel, who gave me an encouraging nod, then at Alexander, who stood silently by my side, his expression unreadable. The decision was mine. I could either face the past or keep running from it. But in that moment, for the first time, I felt like I had the strength to face it. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let fear control my future anymore. I sat in the living room, my fingers nervously tracing the edge of the coffee table as the weight of the decision pressed on me. Mrs. Johnson's words echoed in my mind, the possibility of reconnecting with my mother stirring emotions I had long buried. I hadn't expected this, hadn't wanted it, if I'm being honest. The thought of seeing her again was overwhelming, and yet, it was a reality I couldn't ignore. The past few months had been a blur of change, and now, standing at the threshold of my past, I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would it be everything I had imagined, or would it bring all the pain I'd tried so hard to forget? Rachel, who had become such a steady presence in my life, sat across from me, her expression serious but filled with understanding. "You don't have to do this, Anna," she said, her voice soft. "If you're not ready, no one is going to make you. But if you think this is what you want, then I'm here for you." Her words comforted me, but the fear still lingered, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Was I ready to open this door? What if it led to more hurt, more confusion? "I don't know if I'm ready," I said quietly, the doubt heavy in my voice. "It's been so long, Rachel. I don't even know who she is anymore." Rachel reached out, placing her hand on mine, the warmth of her touch grounding me in that moment. "You don't have to know everything right now," she said. "But you have the chance to find out. And that's more than you've had before." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of reconnecting with my mother. It wasn't just the idea of her that frightened me. It was the fear of not being the person I once was. The girl who had lived with so much loss, who had been forced to grow up too quickly, too alone. Could I still be that girl, or had I changed too much? Could we find a way to rebuild, to find peace between us? "I'm scared," I whispered, more to myself than to Rachel. "What if it's too much? What if it brings everything crashing down again?" Rachel squeezed my hand gently, her eyes filled with empathy. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly. "But you're not going to face it alone. You've come so far, Anna. Whatever happens, you've built something solid here. You're stronger than you realize." I nodded slowly, her words sinking in. She was right. I had built a life here, one that felt real, one that made me feel like I had a future. And if I was going to face my past, I wanted to do it on my own terms, not because I was still afraid of it. A few days later, I found myself sitting in the office of a social worker, a professional who could help track down my mother and facilitate the reunion. It was strange being in this place. Everything felt so clinical, so structured. It felt like the first step towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. But as the social worker, a woman named Ms. Davis, spoke to me about the process, something inside me shifted. "This might take some time," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "We'll do our best to find her. But I want you to be prepared. This could take a while. It might not be easy." I nodded, the weight of her words settling in. Reconnecting with my mother wasn't going to be a smooth process, but it was a chance that I had to take. I couldn't keep running from my past forever. It wasn't going to be simple, and it wasn't going to be painless, but it was something I had to try. A few weeks later, I received a call from Ms. Davis. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, the anticipation almost unbearable. "Anna," she said when I answered, "I have some news. We've located your mother." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" I could barely form the word, the shock overwhelming me. "We've confirmed her location," Ms. Davis continued. "She's alive, and she's been living in a small town about 2 hours away. I have the address, and I can arrange for you to meet her if you're ready." I felt a surge of emotions flood through me. Relief, disbelief, fear. This was really happening. After all this time, after all the uncertainty, I was about to meet her. I don't know if I'm ready," I said, my voice shaking. "I need time to think." "That's perfectly fine," Ms. Davis replied. "Take your time. When you're ready, we'll make the arrangements. No pressure." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling as I sat back in the chair. My thoughts raced, and I didn't know what to do next. I had thought about this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was real, I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what was coming. What if she wasn't the person I remembered? What if everything had changed, and there was nothing left between us? "Are you okay?" Rachel's voice broke through my thoughts, and I looked up to see her standing in the doorway, her expression soft and concerned. "I just got the call," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's alive. She's been found." Rachel stepped into the room and sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "That's a big step," she said quietly. "But you don't have to rush. You don't have to do this unless you're ready." I nodded, the weight of the decision heavy on my chest. I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to face it alone. I had come this far, and no matter what happened next, I knew I had the strength to move forward. And with Rachel by my side, and Alexander's support, I could face whatever came next. The decision was mine to make, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing alone in the dark. I stood there in the quiet of the house, the phone still pressed to my ear, the words of Ms. Davis ringing in my ears. She had found my mother, and now I had to make a decision. She had given me all the details, the location, the time, and the fact that my mother had been living in a small town, isolated from the life I had left behind. The shock of it all was still settling in. I had spent so many years without any hope of reconnecting with her, and now, out of nowhere, she was there, just a short drive away. But was I ready? I had promised myself I wouldn't look back, that I wouldn't let my past define me anymore. And yet, here I was, standing on the edge of something I didn't know how to face. I had come so far, but now, the weight of my past was heavier than ever. I took a deep breath and hung up the phone, feeling a wave of emotion crash over me. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with thoughts of what would happen when I finally met her. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her, to confront all the memories that had been buried for so long. "Are you okay?" Rachel's voice broke through my thoughts, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her expression full of concern. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was okay at all. "I just got the call," I said softly. "She's alive. She's been found." Rachel walked over and sat beside me, her presence calming, like a safe harbor in the middle of my storm. "That's a lot to take in," she said gently. "You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to see her unless you're ready. It's your choice." I felt the weight of her words. Rachel had always been there for me, from the first day I had arrived at the mansion. Her friendship, her support, had become something I couldn't imagine living without. I looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude for having her in my life. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But at the same time, I feel like I have to do this." I can't keep running from it. Rachel smiled, her eyes understanding. You don't have to run, Anna. You're not alone anymore. You've got people here who care about you. And whatever happens, we'll face it together. I nodded, her words giving me a small sense of peace. But the fear, the uncertainty, still gripped my heart. Was I really ready to see my mother again? Would she even recognize me? Would she want to have a relationship after everything that had happened? The doubts were overwhelming. I couldn't just ignore the years of pain, the years of being abandoned. And yet, part of me wanted to reach out, to see if there was a chance to heal. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, and every time I closed my eyes, the image of my mother, the image of our past, haunted me. How would it feel to face her after all this time? Could we ever repair what had been broken? I woke up the next morning exhausted but determined. I knew I couldn't put this off forever. I needed to decide. I found Alexander in the living room, sitting with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up when I walked in, his expression calm, though I could tell he knew something was on my mind. I've been thinking, I said, sitting down across from him. I need to go. I need to see her. Alexander set his cup down and nodded, his gaze steady. Are you sure you're ready? He asked softly. I looked at him, unsure of what I was feeling, but I knew deep down that this was the next step. I don't know, I said quietly, but I don't think I can keep running from it. I have to face it, even if it's scary. Alexander smiled gently, a reassuring smile that made me feel like I wasn't facing this alone. You've got this, Anna, he said. I'm proud of you for taking this step. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you, every step of the way. His words, so simple, yet so full of conviction, gave me the strength I needed to take the first step. I stood up, feeling a rush of emotions hit me. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I was ready to find out. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect, but I couldn't let fear control me anymore. I was ready to see where this path would lead. I packed my things quietly, my heart heavy but resolute. This was it. I was about to meet my mother again, after all these years. I didn't know if it would be the closure I was hoping for, or if it would open up more questions. But I had to know. I couldn't keep living in the shadows of what could have been. The drive to the small town was long, and the silence in the car was suffocating. My thoughts raced as I looked out the window, the landscape passing by in a blur. I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the door handle. This was it. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I knew I had to face it. As we pulled up to the small house, I felt a wave of anxiety crash over me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through that door, but I had come this far. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. And as I walked up the path to the door, I knew there was no turning back. I stood at the doorstep, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the door in front of me. It had been so long since. I had seen her, my mother, and now the moment was here. The door was solid, and in my mind, it represented everything that had happened between us. Years of silence, years of distance. The memories of my childhood, of everything I had tried to leave behind, flooded my mind, making me hesitate. But I couldn't turn back. I had come this far, and now I had to see this through. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and knocked. The sound of the knock felt louder than it should have, reverberating in my ears. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, but then the door creaked open. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her standing there. She was older now, the lines on her face a little deeper, the years having left their mark, but the resemblance was unmistakable. It was her. Anna, she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I couldn't find the words at first. My throat felt tight, my emotions too overwhelming to put into words. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, I didn't know what to say. Mom, I whispered, my voice trembling. The word felt foreign on my tongue, but it was the only one that seemed to fit. She stepped back, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe I was standing there. Oh my God, she breathed, a hand coming up to cover her mouth. You're really here. I nodded, unable to speak, my emotions a tangled mess inside me. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to say, but they were all trapped inside, fighting to escape. Come in, she said, her voice trembling now. Please, come in. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the small house. It was modest, much smaller than the mansion I had become accustomed to, but there was a warmth to it. The walls were lined with old photographs, some of them faded with time. It was strange, seeing these snapshots of a life I hadn't been a part of. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, she said, her voice barely a whisper as she led me into the living room. I sat down on the couch, my hands nervously twisting in my lap. There was so much I wanted to ask, so much I needed to understand, but I didn't know where to begin. She sat across from me, her eyes never leaving my face, as if she were trying to read me. I know I've missed so much, she said quietly. I should have tried harder. I didn't know where you were. I thought about you every day. I looked at her, the words she was saying not fully sinking in. I had spent so many years angry at her, angry at the life she had chosen, angry at everything that had gone wrong. But now, hearing her say those words, something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure what I had expected from this reunion, but it wasn't this. I had wanted answers, wanted to hear an explanation for why she had left me, why she had let me go. But now, sitting here, I realized that there were no simple answers. Why did you leave? I asked, my voice hoarse. The question had been sitting on the tip of my tongue for years, and now it came pouring out. My mother's face fell, and she looked away, as if the answer to my question was too painful for her to face. I didn't want to leave, she said softly. But I wasn't in a place where I could take care of you. I wasn't strong enough. I thought it would be better for you if I let you go. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deep sadness. I had always wondered why she hadn't fought harder to keep me, why she hadn't tried to find me. But now I realized that she hadn't abandoned me out of malice. She had been broken, just like I had been. We had both been lost in our own ways. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent, letting the weight of her words settle between us. After a few moments, she spoke again. I know I can't undo what I've done. I know I can't change the past. But I want you to know that I've always loved you, and I've always wanted to be part of your life. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for you. The sincerity in her voice made my heart ache. She wasn't the same person I remembered, but there was a truth in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly. The words were hard to say, but they were the truth. She nodded, her eyes filled with regret. I don't expect you to, she said softly. I just want you to know that I'm here now. And I'll do whatever it takes to be a part of your life again. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I could forgive her, or if I ever would. But I knew that I couldn't close the door on her completely. There was too much history between us, too much left unsaid. I don't know where this goes from here, I said, my voice shaking. But I want to try. I want to figure out if we can start over. She looked at me, a tear slipping down her cheek, and nodded. I'll do whatever it takes, Anna. I didn't know what the future held for us. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't running anymore. I was standing here, face to face with my past, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see where it could lead. I stood there in the quiet of my mother's home, the weight of the past and the unknown future pressing down on me. It felt like the entire world was shifting beneath my feet. The decision to meet her again, to confront everything I had buried for years, had been a monumental one. And now that it was happening, I was flooded with conflicting emotions. My mother was sitting across from me, her hands clasped tightly together as she watched me, waiting for me to say something. I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear that I would reject her once again. It was a fear I had carried with me for years, and now, it was sitting between us, palpable and real. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to know. But the anger, the bitterness, that I had felt for so long had started to dissipate. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her yet, but I knew that I couldn't keep holding on to that pain either. Why didn't you ever try to find me? I finally asked, my voice quiet but steady. The question had been on my mind for as long as I could remember, and now, it had to be asked. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hands, her voice trembling when she spoke. I tried, she said softly. I really did. But after I left, I didn't know where to start. I didn't have the resources, and I was too afraid of what I might find. I wasn't in a place where I could be the mother you needed. I thought if I stayed away, you'd be better off. I thought you'd be happier without me. The words stung, and I felt my chest tighten. She had left because she thought I'd be better off? I had spent so many years angry at her for abandoning me, but now I saw the fear and confusion in her eyes. I don't know if that's something I can ever understand, I said, the words coming out in a whisper. But hearing you say that, it doesn't make it easier. It just makes it more complicated. My mother nodded, her face contorted with regret. I understand, she said softly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I've always thought about you, that I've never stopped loving you. I looked at her, my emotions a tangled mess. Love. Did she really love me? If she did, why did she leave? Why didn't she try harder? The questions still lingered, unanswered, but I knew that they were questions I might never get a clear answer to. And that was something I had to accept. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you, I said, the words heavy on my tongue. But I'm here now. I'm willing to try, to see if we can rebuild something. My mother's face softened, a tear slipping down her cheek. That's all I can ask for, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. This was more than I had ever expected. I had come here wanting answers, wanting closure, but instead, I had found something far more complicated. I had found the chance for healing. It wouldn't be easy, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her, but I was willing to try. I couldn't keep running from the past forever. Slowly, I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve growing. I don't know what this means yet, I said softly, but I'm willing to try. I want to try to understand. My mother stood up as well, her arms trembling as she reached for me. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for giving me this chance. We stood there for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say, but in that silence, I felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. Something new. Something that, for the first time, didn't feel entirely impossible. Later that evening, as I sat with Alexander, my mind was racing. I had met with my mother, and though it hadn't been an easy conversation, I felt like I was finally on the path to healing. The weight of the past still hung over me, but it didn't feel as heavy as it had before. Alexander sat next to me, his presence calming, his eyes focused on me. How did it go? He asked softly, his voice steady. I looked at him, taking a deep breath. It was hard, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I think I'm ready to try. Alexander gave me a small smile, his eyes full of pride. That's all you can do, Anna. And I'm here for you, no matter what. I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. I had a chance, not just to heal, but to build something new. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to walk it, one step at a time. And with the support of Alexander, Rachel, and even my mother, I knew that whatever happened next, I wouldn't have to face it alone. I sat on the balcony of Alexander's mansion, watching the sun slowly dip beneath the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the estate. The world around me felt still, peaceful, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. Everything had changed so much in the past few months. When I first arrived here, I was lost, broken, unsure of who I was or where I was going. I had been running from my past, from the hurt and the pain, from the memories I had buried deep inside. But now, sitting here, I realized that I wasn't running anymore. I had stopped running, and instead, I was moving forward. Slowly, step by step, Alexander walked up to me, his presence a steady comfort, as always. He took a seat next to me, and for a long moment, we both just watched the sunset in silence. It was a quiet kind of peace, the kind I hadn't known for most of my life. How are you feeling? He asked after a while, his voice gentle, his concern clear. I turned to him, meeting his gaze. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Good, I said, my voice steady. I'm finally starting to feel like I'm on the right path. It's not perfect, and it's still scary sometimes, but I feel like I can breathe again. I feel like I have a future. Alexander smiled back, his eyes soft with pride. You've come a long way, Anna. I'm proud of you. You've done the hard work. Now, it's about continuing to take those steps. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle inside me. It had taken a lot to get here, to let go of the fear, to open up to the possibility of healing, of growing, of building a life that wasn't just about surviving. And now, with every new day, it felt a little easier. I had faced my past, confronted the parts of me that I had hidden for so long, and with that, I had found the strength to move forward. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. There would be moments of doubt, of fear, and there would be setbacks. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I had people by my side who cared about me, who believed in me, people who had helped me rediscover myself. and I was ready to face whatever came next. The past wasn't something I could erase, and it wasn't something I could forget, but it was no longer holding me hostage. I had learned to make peace with it, to accept it, and to use it as fuel to create a future I could be proud of. I had learned to forgive myself, and in that, I had found freedom. You know, there's something I've been thinking about, Alexander said, breaking the silence. I turned to him, curious. What is it? He looked out at the horizon, as if weighing his words carefully. I know you've come a long way, but I think it's time to think about what's next. You've started to rebuild, you've started to heal, but now it's time to dream. What do you want, Anna? What do you really want out of life? His words hung in the air, a challenge, a call to action. What did I want? I had spent so long just surviving that I hadn't allowed myself to dream. I had focused on getting through the day, making it from one moment to the next. But now, I had the chance to think about more than just surviving. I had the chance to live. I've never really thought about it, I said honestly. I guess I always just assumed I wouldn't have the chance. But now, I want to create something. I want to build something with purpose. Alexander smiled, his expression approving. I knew you had it in you, he said softly. You're not just a survivor, Anna. You're a fighter, and you're capable of so much more than you realize. I felt a surge of hope flood through me. For so long, I had felt like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. But now, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was capable of something big, something meaningful. I didn't know exactly what that would look like yet, but I was excited to find out. The next few months were filled with moments of discovery. I continued my art classes, pushing myself further with every new lesson. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when the fear crept back in, telling me I wasn't good enough. But I kept going, kept practicing, and slowly, my confidence grew. I started to see the potential in my work, the creativity that had always been there, waiting to be unleashed. I started to dream bigger. The path wasn't always straight. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and challenges I hadn't anticipated. But through it all, I had a support system. Alexander was there, encouraging me, believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And Rachel, always by my side, reminding me of how far I'd come. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like I was building a future, one where I wasn't just surviving, but living. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but I had a chance. I had a future, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was worthy of it. I had come a long way from the girl who had stepped into Alexander's mansion with nothing but fear and uncertainty. Now, I was someone with hope, with dreams, and with the strength to chase them. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready. I had the tools to face them, and I knew that no matter what happened, I wasn't alone. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew where I was headed. And that made all the difference.